Shalom, Chag Sameach. It's a great pleasure to be able to teach here for the 10th anniversary of 10 Minutes of Torah. Fantastic project, and no better day than to celebrate that on Shavuot, Zman Matan Toratenu, the holiday of the giving of Torah. Hope you're all well rested and energized to do some more learning. My name is Rabbi Josh Weinberg, the president of ARTSA, the Association of Reformed Zionists of America. And what I want to bring is a little bit of Israel-diaspora relations according to a famous 20th century rabbi, not a Reform rabbi necessarily, or at all. This is the Torah of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, also known as the Rav, one of the greatest thinkers and minds in the Jewish world of the 20th century. So Soloveitchik teaches that we have two britot, two covenants. On Shavuot here we're talking about the covenant that was delivered with Torah. And he talks about the covenant of what he calls Brit Goral and Brit Ye'ud, the covenant of fate and the covenant of destiny. And what he says is that each Jew, in order to be a Jew, we must share in the two covenants, that of the fate of the Jewish people and that of destiny. He assigns them geographical locations, and that the covenant of fate is the covenant of Egypt, of Mitzrayim, and that we were all slaves in Egypt together. And the covenant of destiny is the covenant of Sinai, of Mount Sinai, and that we were all present to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. Now, what he does is ascribe two verses in the Torah that sort of exemplify what it means to be part of these two covenants. So the covenant of fate comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 6, verse 7, where he says, "V'lakachti etchem li la'am, v'hayita lechem l'Elohim, v'yadatem ki ani Adonai Elohechem, hamotzi etchem mitachat tzivlot Mitzrayim." He says, "And I took you as to be for me as a people, and you will be to me, and I will be your God. And you know that I am the Lord your God, who took you out from the suffering of Egypt." So that's the first covenant, that you joined together as part of the suffering in Egypt, and God in turn redeemed you from that suffering as part of your fate. What he's saying, to be part of the covenant of fate, is that to be a Jew means to carry with us everything that's ever happened to the Jewish people, whether it was from the time of the slavery in Egypt all the way through our modern trials and tribulations. On the flip side, the covenant of Sinai, or the covenant of destiny, takes us later in the book of Exodus to chapter 24, also verse 7, where he says, or where it's written, "Vayikach sefer habrit, vayikra b'oznei ha'am, vayimru kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh v'nishma." He says, "And we took the book of the covenant, and it will be read in the ears of the people." And they said everything that God commands us, everything that God says, we will do and we will hear. Right? So essentially we will do and we will learn about it. That commands us that if we're going to be part of the destiny of the Jewish people, we need to follow this Torah, this covenant. So on the one hand, to be Jewish means to be part of the fate, to be part of what has happened to us in the past. But also to be Jewish, you can't have just the past. We have to go to this joint destiny, and that is influenced by Torah and by teaching and continuing to study and to do mitzvot. Soloveitchik sums it up with a short story. This is the story about the man with two heads. It's written in a para midrash by someone called Abba Gurion in probably around the 7th century. But I'll just recount it to you here shortly. There's a man called Ahmadai who was born with two heads. Ahmadai then has 7 children. The first 6 of whom are what we might call normal, in that they only have one head. The 7th child also has 2 heads. Ahmadai grows old and he dies. And now the question becomes, how are we going to divide up his inheritance? They all said, let's divide it up 7 ways, according to the 7 children. But the 7th says, wait a second. We are, in fact, two children, so we should divide it up 8 ways, and we get 2 portions of the inheritance. So they have a problem, and who do they go to solve their problem? None other than the wisest figure in all of Jewish history. You guessed it, King Solomon. So they go to King Solomon and they ask, what should we do with this dilemma? And King Solomon, as per his reputation, gives a Solomonic solution where he says, okay, I'm going to do the following test to prove whether the 7th child with 2 heads is really 1 or 2. He said, I'm going to blindfold one head, and I'm going to pour boiling water on the head of the other. If the 2nd child, the blindfolded head, cries out in pain, then we will know that this 2-headed person is really 1. But if not, then they're 2 and they'll be privy to 2 portions of the inheritance. The end of the story goes that they, in fact, do this test, and both heads cry out in pain, and they are, in fact, 1. Soloveitchik brings this story to say that this 2-headed man is actually the Jewish people. Is that sometimes we are with 2 heads and we live on different sides of the ocean or different sides of the world. But the test is really, are we one body? Are we both adherents to the covenant of fate and of destiny? And my hope is that we as a Jewish people follow, or we feel very deeply what happens with the rest of the Jews, whether in Israel or the United States, and we care deeply, and we both listen to these covenants of fate and of destiny. And with that, I wish you a Chag Sameach, to continue to feel what's happened to our people and to push forward to our great destiny. Shalom.